Back here for our fourth debate in a series of debates for the West Anchorage Seat D Assembly race. We're joined here by incumbent Cameron Perez-Verdilla. Liz Vasquez, who we reached out to by email, phone, message, voicemail multiple times, never responded. So we do have her here kind of in spirit. We'll talk to Niall Williams after this. He's also in the race, but he's raised no money, so we're going to do that separately for this race. So again, I want to thank you, incumbent Cameron Perez-Verdilla, for being here.
Thanks.
I'll let you start with an opening statement, 2 minutes, and then you and I will have a discussion on the issues.
Sure. Well, I just want to thank everybody and thank you for this opportunity to be here. My name is Cameron Perez-Verdilla. I'm running for the Anchorage Assembly, representing the West Side. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in Alaska, originally from Utqiagvik, or formerly known as Barrow. I am a son of educators. My mother and father, Jess and Shirley Holloway, worked as teachers and administrators in Alaska for decades. I'm a dad. I have two young children who go to school here in Anchorage, and my wife is a nurse practitioner here in town. My background, I've worked for about 25 years for small nonprofit organizations, building budgets and building teams, and working really hard to shepherd organizations through very difficult times. My current job is I'm the president and CEO of the Alaska Humanities Forum. I also served 4 years on the Anchorage School Board, serving as president also. And for the last 3 years, I've been on the Anchorage Assembly. And I've done lots of things over the last 3 years, but a few things that I'm proud of is the work that I did in public safety. I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and also shepherding through a very difficult time during COVID. And there's lots of things that I want to share about that, but we'll get to that in a minute. The bottom line is that I love this city. This is where I'm raising my children. This is where I want them to grow up, and I want it to be a safe, prosperous, vibrant place for all of us. And that's why I'm serving on the Assembly, and that's why I want to stay.
Thanks, Cameron. First thing I want to ask you about is the Assembly has been very contentious the last several years. It really started kind of in 2020 when Mayor Bronson was elected. That relationship has gotten quite contentious at times. You're not one of the louder voices, but you've seen all this. I guess I want to get your feedback or your thoughts on why things have gotten so contentious, and going forward how we can resolve that.
Yeah, I think it's not just us, right? I think nationally and throughout our state and locally, we're in the middle of a very polarized time. I was just talking to somebody recently that said, the culture war is getting in the way of getting stuff done. So I think that there is a tenor and a tone right now that is it's really sad to me that we can't come together and work on things more. But my style is often to focus on the work. I really do pride myself as somebody who listens to both sides. I really want to hear different perspectives that are not my own, and I actually incorporate those into my thinking and my process in order to ultimately make a decision that I think is the right decision. And I think that what we've seen is a community that in some ways has risen up because they're upset. They're upset with what's going on in their city. They're frustrated about COVID. They're frustrated about our economy. They're frustrated about public safety, and they have a right to stand up and speak out on that. I wish in some cases it was done in a different way, but I respect them for coming out and speaking their mind. And I would just say about Bronson and the administration, we see in the media a lot about the areas that we disagree, but I would say that there are actually a lot of areas that we're working on together. I use it as an example, the budget. 97% of the budget we agreed on. It was 3% that we didn't. And so to focus on that 3% and to work through those things is what we had to do. Same thing in terms of the number of appointments that he made. Most of the appointments by far were celebrated and thanked. There was just a few that we had challenges with, and I think there were good reasons for those. And there's a number of those kinds of things down the road. But I would just say moving forward, I'm willing to work with the administration. I'm willing to continue to find things we can do together. But I'm also, it's really important to me that if there's things that I think are bad for Anchorage, or that I think are unsafe, or just bad policy, then I'll be the first person to stand up against that.
On that note, when it comes to homelessness, Bronson ran on kind of a very different approach to what Mayor Berkowitz had, and some of the Assembly had talked about the different buildings, and they had tried to go for the Navigation Center in Tudor, and that's been a pretty big fight. But now there's this facilitator, and Sullivan Arena's been there for 2 years.
Yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about homelessness and why this problem persists, and the relationship between the Assembly and the new Mayor Bronson on this navigation center?
I mean, there's a lot in that question. I would just say, first of all, that I've worked in the nonprofit field for a long time, and I worked in homelessness in Anchorage, and so it's something that I've been involved with for a long time, even before the assembly. And I feel like that for a long time in our city, we've not made much progress. But I feel like at this point, we are actually making some progress. I'm hopeful that we're going to move forward and actually make some real steps that are going to improve. I would say that when Bronson came in office, I think that he campaigned on this, and that this navigation center that he wants to build was his campaign promise. And I think what's happened is that through the facilitated process, I think him and his team have gotten more information and learned more about all the work that's been going on for decades, and we've come to a point where we're agreeing on a different path forward that includes the navigation center, but also includes a number of other facilities. I think a comprehensive and long-term sort of strategy for how we're going to handle this is the right solution. And I think there's also a lot of agreement about the need for mental health treatment and drug and alcohol treatment. Those are core. And so those all have to be part of the solution. And I would just say that we've got a long way to go. The other thing I would say is that for the first time in a long time, private organizations and philanthropic organizations are actually coming to the table and putting real money forward, almost $10 million, because they believe that this plan is actually something that can work. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I actually do think that we're moving in the right direction.
One of the elements to homelessness is housing,
Mm-hmm.
and right now we see the average price of a home in Anchorage is, I think it's over $420,000.
Right.
But there's also really a supply availability issue.
Yep.
What is the role of government here, and also this bridge, Cabota Bridge, has been talked about recently a little bit more.
Yeah.
Do you support of the bridge, which would obviously allow for more land over there in Kinnick Arms?
Sure. Well, I think that bridge is something that we can discuss later. I don't think it's a priority now. I think that we need to focus on Anchorage where it is now and try to incentivize development. I think that's a real key. I think we need to find a land that is available and develop it responsibly with the community, like we're trying to do in Turnagain right now, where the administration came forward and wants to do some development there. And I think it was rushed, so we need to bring the community in and have them be a part of it. But I think the key is that we need to incentivize development. We need to create a space where businesses can do it affordably and can do it efficiently. So as government, we need in some ways get out of the way, right? We need to create an easier way for them to get all the things they need to be able to build, but we need to make it so that they can do it in a cost-efficient way, and that's really difficult right now. But I think through tax abatement and through some of the incentives that we're looking at in the future, I think it can happen. And this summer is going to be a really productive summer. I think it's going to be a summer where you're going to see more construction, more housing being built, and more tourism. So I think it's a summer that we can really look forward to.
On that note, abatement and development, I moved here in 2004, and it seems like ever since I've been here, everyone talks about revitalizing downtown, but downtown really hasn't changed much.
Yeah.
And now after COVID, there's a lot more people who can work remotely, and there's been talk of folks moving up here, but then they say, the downtown's not like any other, other big Seattle or towns like that. What can we do with downtown to make it more attractive and more fun and get people to move here?
Have you been down there lately? It's not
a little bit, not as much as before. I mean, I used to go down more, and it's not as
vibrant.
It's not as vibrant as it used to be. It was never, I would say, in my time here, it was never vibrant. But I think it's not gone the right way, I would say.
Well, I mean, not to blame everything on COVID, but it's been a tough two years. It's been a tough 2 years for development. A lot of the projects that we had planned two years ago have all been put on hold. And so I think as an assembly right now, we need to incentivize and help small businesses to recover. We need to create an environment where they can come back online and they can come back and be successful. Labor is a huge challenge. We don't have enough people to fill the jobs that we have, and this summer that's going to be even harder. So as an assembly and as a city, we need to do what we can to attract more people to come. So in the short term, I think downtown is vital, because I think that if we don't get downtown back to a place where people want to go there, people want to go out to eat, they want to live there, then it's going to be challenging for our entire city. And I don't represent downtown, but I know that where downtown goes, is a good indication for our entire city.
I mean, there's the Key Bank building they're doing, but and I think a lot of folks can criticize and question some of the things happening in Seattle and their government. But when I went to Seattle in September, there was cranes and construction and development everywhere.
We need to build.
Everywhere downtown Seattle, you look, there was some kind of building going on.
Well, this is the frustration that I have right now, is that there's a debate about cutting, right? About cutting the budget, about cutting our bonds, about these kinds of things. And I want to be efficient. I want to make sure that we're spending smart. I want to make sure that we're not overtaxing folks, and we have a tax structure. We can talk about that. That is a challenge in and of itself. But right now, we need to build. We need to invest in our city. We need to have a robust bond package. We need to make sure that we're creating an environment where businesses can get back online and thrive. We need to invest. And I think that's the smartest thing that we can do right now. And I agree with you. Downtown needs to be a focus of that. But in my area in West Anchorage, I mean, there's lots of opportunity for us to develop more housing, more affordable housing. And I think we need to make sure that we're creating incentives for builders to go out there and do that in a responsible way too.
I want to ask you about the airport. I know it's run by the state, but we see after COVID, it's become for a brief period of time the busiest cargo airport in the world. It's been for many decades a cargo airport. Now with the Russian airspace situation, there's even more planes coming into the airport. I'm just curious your thoughts on the airport and what that means for the airport development. And I know there's been some issues with some of the community councils regarding issues with the airport and development. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I just answered this question in a previous meeting that, well, first of all, that the airport's vital. It's vital for our economy. It's vital for our city. The airport and the port are two things that we have to make sure are supported and running effectively in order for our town to be effective. But like anything, we have to develop things in a responsible way. And I think that's partly what I've been trying to do is work with community councils, work with people that live in that area, and make sure that they have a seat at the table. Make sure that their voices and their concerns are heard when that development happens. And I think that has happened with the airport. I think there's always frustration, but I'm still concerned about the project that's going in there. I'm concerned about the water. I'm concerned about the noise. I'm concerned about whether that is going to really negatively impact that community. And so the role that I can play and that we can play on the Assembly is to make sure that communities have a voice and have a seat at that table. So when that development happens, it's done in a way that's responsible. But I also think that for our town to move forward and for the jobs and the development that we want, these kinds of projects are essential.
Well, it feels to me like sometimes whether it's the airport or this bridge or the port or any projects, somebody gets mad and then it's really a statewide problem, but it's just nothing really big happens anymore because somebody gets mad and then everything stops.
Well, and I this is one of the reasons why I think people like me and others that really want to see both sides of it, but want to make decisions as well. So I think the most important thing is we create a space where everybody gets a voice, everybody gets to share what they want, but we've got to move forward. And I think that's what we're living in a time right now where it's, as I said, it's very polarized. And people, rather than actually seeing the whole picture, are hunkered down and fighting for what they want, right? And they're not necessarily seeing the long-term vision of our city. And I think that's a big piece right now is we're in reactive mode. I think that's because of COVID and because of our economy. We're scared and we're worried about the next year, the next 2 years, and we should be. But we also need to be thinking about the next 10 years, the next 20 years, and how we're going to continue to create an environment with parks and trails and infrastructure so that my kids, when they grow up, they have a place that they want to live. And if they go off to college or go off to work somewhere, they want to come back here and they want to live here, and this is their home, right? So we've got to do the short-term work, but we've also got to do the long-term work.
I want to ask you about the body cams the voters approved.
Yeah.
The funding of the cameras. It's been I think about a year.
Right.
Is that a decision to the APD or is that a decision to the Assembly and the mayor? And do you support the use of body cams?
Yeah, so I was one of the initial members of the Assembly that really pushed to have the body cams happen. I serve as chair of the Public Safety Committee, so yes, I am a huge fan of body cams. I think it's a modern way for us to police. It's important because it allows greater transparency and accountability for both the community, but also for the police. It protects citizens and it protects the police. So I've been a huge fan of it. I've been very involved in it throughout. It's taken longer than we wanted it to take. We had Now we're on our third police chief during that period of time. New administration has come in. There's real debate over this policy. And now there's the work with the union so that happens. I think it's probably, safely, it's probably a year away before they're on the street. But we're making progress towards it. But they're essential. They're essential for our community. We need to make sure that they're on the street as soon as possible.
It seems like one of the issues isn't the cost of the cameras or using the cameras. It's processing it and storing it and then deciding. I'm of the mind that more disclosure is better, but but it's a question of what gets released and what doesn't. And we saw it with this recent shooting a few years ago. I think it took a couple of years for the I think his name was Mr. Hassan, who was, it took a couple of years for the dash cam footage to be released.
Yep. Well, I would just say that I am for greater transparency, greater accountability. I'm frustrated by the pushback on the initial policy, which allowed for automatic release of footage, and it had clear guidelines in terms of when the cameras are turned off and turned on. My understanding is that state law is very restrictive in terms of privacy, and that's really the debate that we're having right now, is privacy law versus accountability and transparency. But the good thing is that the debate continues. The Alaska Black Caucus, the ACLU, and many other organizations are at the table, and they're still fighting for greater transparency and accountability. And I think that we need to make sure that this policy and these cameras serve the public and get us the information that we deserve.
I want to ask you about the vote by mail. I don't think you weren't on the assembly when they approved that. It was an 18.
No, but I was actually involved in the initial committee that brought that forward.
It was like a 10-member or something?
Yeah, it was bigger than that, like 30, I think was initially, and then it got narrowed down. But yeah, I'm certainly a fan of it, and I think it's really an important innovation for our city.
Okay, and last thing I want to ask you before the closing statement, I guess what are your thoughts on the top 3 issues facing the city right now or the assembly?
Yeah, well, I would say that, so I've been knocking on a lot of doors. I'm probably in the 2000s in terms of doors that I've knocked on, and I did another 100 this weekend. And what I'm hearing is public safety, I'm hearing economic recovery, and I'm hearing public health. Those are the 3. And public health, including homelessness. I'm hearing that people want our city to be safe, they want our city to be healthy, and they want jobs, and they want revitalization. And that is the things that I'm hearing most. And those are the areas that I'm focusing on moving forward. As I mentioned, I'm chair of the Public Safety Committee, chair of the Public Health Policy Committee, and those are 2 areas that I continue to work on. So those are priorities for me.
Okay, well, Cameron Perez-Verdia, the incumbent, West Anchorage Assembly, I want to thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm going to give you time for a closing statement.
Sure.
And again, we invited Liz Vasquez, multiple attempts to communicate with her every way possible, and she didn't get back to us. So we have Cameron, and then after this we'll have Niall Williams talking to Niall Williams about his race. So Cameron, if you want to do a closing statement.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Jeff, for this opportunity. This has been a good conversation, and we had the opportunity to talk about the issues that really I care about most. I think this is a really important time. I know this is a really important time. This is a time for important, good, balanced leadership. It's not the time to have somebody on the assembly who brings, an ideological bent and focuses on that. It's a need for having somebody who gets good information, listens to both sides, and really is interested in doing what's best for our city. And that's what I think is the kind of leader that I am. And so, I would appreciate your vote. Just a reminder that the ballots are out March 15th, and the election ends on April 5th. So get out there and vote.
Thanks, Cameron. You took my closing statement on the ballots called March 15th and concludes April 5th. But I want to thank you again for coming in.
Sure.
Again, we invited Liz Vasquez multiple times and didn't respond. We'll after this talk to Niall Williams, who's also in the race. Hasn't raised any money, but he's also a candidate in the West Anchorage race. So I want to thank Cameron Perez-Verdia again for coming in. And this is the 4th debate in our series of debates and for the upcoming 5 Anchorage Assembly races. And stay tuned for them. You can watch them on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. And appreciate you tuning in for the Alaska Landmine debate series for the Anchorage Assembly races. Thanks. Okay, now we're going to West Anchorage candidate Niall Williams. Again, we extended an invitation to Liz Vasquez via email, phone call, voicemail, basically all means of communication, and she never got back to us. So we do have her here just kind of in spirit. Here she is. And the incumbent Cameron Perez-Verdia, he's interviewing him separately. He just wanted to do all three of you guys or just on his own. So that's how it's turned out. But we want to start with you. Niall, 2-minute opening statement, and then we'll talk about some issues facing Anchorage.
Wonderful. So Niall Sherwood Williams. The reason why I am running for Assembly is I really want to hold the government officials accountable to we the people. And it is our government. It should be our direction for the city. And I've always went to these meetings, Jeff, even when I haven't been paid. I do so because I really enjoy it. I enjoy learning about what's important for the city. And it's really time for a change, Jeff. The solution is not Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal. I'm none of those. I'm for we the people. I grew up in a small town outside of Syracuse, New York, and I've been fleeing tyranny since I was born in 1986. I've sought to make my family here. I've married my wife, and this is where we want to continue our family and settle in Anchorage. This is where she's from. I'm new to the city, but she's lived here her whole life. And I really will work hard for the citizens of West Anchorage.
Thanks, Niall. You mentioned you've been to a lot of the meetings, and I think for the folks who go to the meetings, they've seen you there. Sometimes it's you get very excited. There's been some kind of issues even outside of the meetings. The civility in the assembly has been pretty wild the last several years. If you're elected, how do you plan to work with everybody when you've obviously had a lot of issues when you're showing up at the meetings and testifying and getting kind of almost argumentative and in some cases, I think, removed from some of the meetings?
So yes, I have been removed from a couple of meetings and arrested for exercising constitutionally protected activity. And I've done so because I feel like standing up for my rights, freedom of the speech, freedom to assemble, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and freedom to petition, all those are unabridgable rights that come from our Creator. And so they're inalienable. They can't be voided by man or by woman. So when I'm exercising my right to freely speak to the assembly, or when any citizen is, that's their time. It's not the government's time or the chair's time. I hear that term all too often. It should be we the people's time to be able to share our ideas and decide how we want to move forward as a city. So one of my distinct promises in my campaign is to maintain 50-word or less ordinances. I want it to be able to be understood by someone who's 16 in high school, right? Someone who's a young and up-and-coming, new, soon-to-be voter. I want them to be able to understand it. And for it to be able to be, there's too many words. Charter's too big. We got to shrink back government to a smaller, more limited form.
Just a quick follow-up on the free speech, First Amendment, very important, but obviously if everybody kind of said whatever they wanted, the meeting wouldn't be able to function. So there has to be some rules and some order for the meetings assembly meetings, any government meeting to function, right?
Mm-hmm. And so for the disorder part of it, I feel as though that often comes from the chair of the assembly, that they are the person actually creating the disorder. I will stand up for those individual rights for all citizens. And when I honor my oath on the assembly to defend the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Alaska against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and make sure that, our charter and ordinances, they conform to that constitutional law. Mm. And by upholding those rights, civility comes from that. When I don't infringe your rights, Jeff, and you don't infringe mine, then we have a civil relationship.
I know you've talked a lot about homelessness. I've seen you make posts and discuss the issue. The Sullivan's been open for 2 years now. The homelessness problem doesn't seem to be getting better. It seems to be getting worse in a lot of ways. I want to hear what you think about the homelessness problem and what you think about the Sullivan Arena being in place for now 2 years.
The longest standing mass care shelter in the United States of America is right here in Anchorage, Alaska, the Sullivan Arena. It's an ongoing human rights disaster, Jeff. Drug and human trafficking are frequent. We still have an unsolved rape that occurred by a 99+1 Inc. employee. That organization was formed on July 1st, 2021 by Terry Pisa.
You're saying, I've heard that. You're saying quite a charge, an employee of the...
Oh, it was reported in Alaska's news source.
By an employee of the company. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. And yes, this organization was founded by Terry Pisa the day the mayor took office. She was a big fundraiser for the mayor. So these are the type of issues, like, I'm not right or left, Jeff. I'm going to call it as I see it. And that seems like a quid pro quo deal. And I have a real issue with it, because what ends up happening is there's human rights violations everywhere. It's unclean. You look at the front page of the ADN when they finally got in, the news, right, the mainstream media, and they have a picture on the front, and there's a gentleman mopping, and there's 4 or 5 people on the 250 cots that are there. So they had moved everybody out for the photo op, cleaned it up. When I went in there with my GoPro, it was mayhem. People were getting assaulted. I mean, you mentioned the other day you spent the night there, so I'm sure you saw a lot of stuff. I mean, it needs to be cleaned up immediately, and individualized healthcare that starts with mental health, drug, and alcohol concerns. Those have to be solved first before we can throw people in a giant room and expect that we're going to have anything other than disaster.
Yeah, and I agree. Sometimes when the media goes in there in a controlled way, it is quite sanitized. And I did spend the night and saw how wild and chaotic it was. And it is it's not something everybody sees. And I think maybe if they did see it, there'd be some changes made.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask you about affordable housing. You had said when you first moved here, I think you were homeless or you were staying in the airport.
Yes, sir.
So price of housing in Anchorage, the average price is over $400,000, but there's also an issue of availability of supply of housing. So maybe talk about your history and then what you think is the solution to more housing or more availability of housing.
So yes, I was homeless for the first 9 months I was here. For those 9 months, I lived on the non-secure side of Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport, sleeping on various benches there. And I would
you just rolled in?
Just roll in on the bus. I'd sleep on a bench with my blanket. I'd go to either the Alaska Club gym for a while, or the YMCA down at Diamond Center, and that's where I do my showering and all that stuff, and pulled myself up by my bootstraps, so I know how to do it. It's a real issue, though. There's a lack of services in this town. They all shut off on the weekends. The public transit is an issue. The housing, $1,600 for a 2-bedroom, average rental price, give or take, depending on where you are around town. Like you said, $400,000 for a home. And we saw a 13% relative increase for year-over-year home valuations for Anchorage residents. So that hits their bottom line too, Jeff. It hits the senior citizens that are on a fixed income. They're getting whacked with higher tax bills because of that. We can't bond our way out of this problem. We need to solve the budgetary problems from the ground up, line item by line item, and eliminate these duplicative services. And I know I'm kind of spinning here, but I feel as though the cost of the homes increased so much because the city's short on money. They're waiting on money from the port, money for transportation.
But the prices has gone up. I mean, people are offering 30, 40, 50,000 over asking price. So I mean, the values of the homes have increased.
They have, but is it because there's a lack of availability, or just because people don't want to buy right now because the prices are too darn high? I don't.
I mean, I think vacancy, the supply is obviously a big issue.
I mean, either way, it's driving people away. If you want seasonal workers for the summer to come here, I mean, $1,600 is that's a high bankroll for some of these folks that are coming here to work a few-month job in the summer. But the solution is also not to take a Woodland Park lot like was done and do it outside of the Turnagain Community Council and try and sell it in a non-competitive bid, what was originally supposed to be parkland. So we need to be careful that we don't let the special interest of affordable housing become hijacked. I think the private business will always find the least expensive way to be able to accomplish this. I'm not talking about government giving the money to do it. If we just step out of the way and avoid some of the regulation, business will catch up and we will get more housing opened up.
We're going to go to candidate questions. Obviously, there's no one else here, but if Liz was here, I'm curious, what would you, if she were here, what would you ask her? You can
I would say,
you don't have to ask her directly, but just.
I would say, Ms. Vasquez, why can't you tell the truth to your potential voters? I mean, on the one hand, you state that you're not for higher taxes, but then you speak of increasing the alcohol tax rate. You speak of increasing the hotel tax. You speak of passing more bond packages. So that will cause a higher cost of government. $550 million for Anchorage municipal budget, plus about $900 million for Anchorage School District. We need to take that and cut it in half. And you're lying to the people and telling them, on one hand, you'd be conservative. The only thing you'd be conservative with, there wouldn't be much. It's too bad. I really wish you would have been here today so we could have talked about your double talk.
Thank you, Niall. Liz cannot answer because she's not here. But good question. Appreciate that. I want to ask you about the body cams. That's been in the news recently. The voters passed some funding for that, and it's not been implemented. There's some pushback, maybe not pushback, but the talk from the police union to implement it. Who should be ultimately in charge of that decision? And do you support the use of body cams?
The last question, 100% body cameras on every public safety employee across the state. When they passed the $1.8 million bond in April of 2021, they made a promise to the voters that they would have this done. Well, come to find out, they don't know what type of body cameras they're going to purchase. They don't even have a draft policy completed or finalized yet. It's 6 pages with many exemptions as to when they would be able to release it to the public. I mean, I'm looking for justice for Bashir Hassan, justice for Kawika Pakaro.
This is the young man that was caught on, I think, the dash cam.
Yes.
Being killed.
But we still haven't seen that yet. It still hasn't been released unto his family.
The video was released.
The video for Kawika?
No, the first, the
Bashir, yes.
Bashir Hassan, yeah.
But it took 2.5 years, and that's way too long. It needs to be more readily available, and they need to be on all the time. We can't have officer discretion for them to shut it off. So when my opponent, Cameron Perez-Verdia, says, I've really tried hard to get this through, he's the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and I think this is one of his most abject failures to the people. And he does have a voice as an assembly member, and I, as an assembly member, I will stand up to that union, that fraternal order of police, Chief Michael Curley. I will look him in the eye and I will demand that those body cameras be put on now, not just on a select few officers. Otherwise, I will strip the funding for the police. And it's because they need to be accountable to the people, Jeff, and to uphold those individual rights. And I want to see them on the mobile crisis team as well. So any mental health professionals that are entering people's homes or helping out with housing and homelessness in the streets, I really want to make sure individual liberty is upheld.
I want to ask you, you've been to a lot of the meetings, you're obviously knowledgeable on the issues. You haven't raised any money. How do you expect to campaign or get votes when running an election and running for office requires money to reach the voters?
This is my campaign. When I'm in front of you, Jeff, and in front of the voters here on Facebook, I hope that this gets communicated across the channels and far and wide in West Anchorage, and that they're able to hear my voice and my principles. And I've turned down money because I don't want to be beholden to a corporation, a special interest group, someone that wants a favor. So tonight, when I go home, my wife and I, we're going to cut up a bunch of foam board, and we have a little stencil cut out, and then we're going to use spray paint, and we're going to do it the old-fashioned way, inexpensive. X-Acto knife, spray paint, foam board.
Old school.
Yeah, a couple of stakes, hang them on some bridges, let's go.
Oh, steaks for not eating steaks, but steaks for the ground.
Oh, I hope to eat a steak later. That would be delicious.
Last thing I want to ask, what would you say the top 3 issues facing Anchorage and the Assembly are right now?
Number 1, a failure of the Assembly members to honor their oath to the Constitution of the United States and to the state of Alaska. Number 2, a failure to balance the budget. And number 3, a failure in overall accountability, honesty, and integrity. And this can come in posting all your financial transactions online. That should be public information. How was the CARES Act money spent? Well, I made that public information request. The city told me it cost me $10,000 to produce the record of how the money was spent. That should be public information. We all know that. And we know that money squeaked out the sides and was lost and pilfered. And that money still needs to be accounted for.
Well, I appreciate that. Mr. Williams, Niall Williams for West Anchorage Assembly seat. Thanks for coming in here. I'm going to give you a quick moment to do a closing statement.
Can we do the port and then do closing?
We'll do the port. If you want to talk about the port, we can do that, sure.
Okay, so I, Niall Williams, intend to update the port, the Alaska Railroad, and Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport.
All three.
All three to the 21st century.
That's a big one.
That's a big one, and I'm going to make the United States military pay for it. Yes, because that is the most critical.
Sounds like a Trump a little bit.
It sort of does.
Make somebody else pay for it.
But they're the ones who primarily use it, Jeff, and we do as well. All Alaskans do. We're seeing the price in everything, from the cars to the milk to the gas pump. It's across the board. And if we don't get that strategic resources under control and the ability to be able to transport it, that's why we need the airport and the railroad too, because those are critical infrastructures to get those goods out to the villages and out to rural Alaska and remote Alaska, which also is important. Anchorage is a hub.
Well, again, thank you, Niall, for coming in, Niall Williams, and obviously Liz couldn't make it. Talked to Cameron before, but I'm going to give you up to 2 minutes for a closing statement. And again, I want to thank you for coming in here and talking to me about your election.
Thank you, Jeff. So to the voters of Anchorage, I would really appreciate your vote now and in between April 5th, 2022. I will tirelessly work. I will always be available for comment, for dialogue, every email, every in-person talk. It's all a voice, and each vote counts the same. You're all equal, every person. And I will stand up for the rights of the individual and for the rights of the family and for the rights of the child. I have always been of the position that you have the right to refuse medical care, such as putting a medical device over your nose and mouth, and such as choosing to vaccinate or not. I think those are very important and critical issues. I will balance the budget. I will go through line item by line item. I'll remove those duplicative services. We have a right by charter to be free from those, and I'll make sure they're removed. I'll be a hawk against corruption and conspiracy and backroom deals. There's going to be no more open meetings violations if you put Niall Sherwood Williams on the assembly. There's going to be no more money that disappears. The meetings will be always open in person to the public. You'll always have the opportunity to do online too, but you need to be able to come in person and redress your government. And I'll always be sitting there to look you in the eye, Anchorage and West Anchorage. And I really look forward to working hard for you, West Anchorage. Please vote me in between now and April 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, Niall, so much for coming here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Again, I want to thank everybody for watching. This was the West Anchorage debate. We talked to Niall Williams and incumbent Cameron Perez Verdilla. We're going to do one more debate. This is the fourth one in our series. Oh, there goes Liz. And we'll be posting these on our Facebook channel and Facebook and YouTube channel. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more of our debates here on the Alaska Landmine.